My first impression was that it was a really beautiful, fantastical story. It it felt like a real exploration for George in terms of the the films we know him for. This felt like a little deviation for a little bit, but at the heart of it was a great story with heart and vision and a real sort of sense of nostalgia and history, beauty. Um, I was quite moved by it. The biggest draw for me is to work with Tilda Swinton and George Miller, and the three of us and this incredible team here pull together this story. Tilda has been like an incredible partner, just an incredible. She's an amazing actor, a complete majestic figure, right? But not only that, she can really boil down into the very granular details of collaboration. Even down to our words that we're each saying. We did many roundtables over possibly 3 years now, almost, about this character, about this story, about their relationship and such. And so working with Tilda was everything I thought it would be and more. I mean, a complete sort of gem of a working relationship, I think. Tilda and I were keen to make sure that the language, the story really affects the audience in a way that the audience will go, I wonder what I would have done. I wonder what, and George is really like, one of the things I learned a lot about from George is about storytelling and how to connect with the audience, just small details from how often an actor who's talking looks away. And while he looks away for those 2 seconds, does he lose the audience or are they drawn in for more? Just the tiniest details that really became this sort of mosaic of information that started to feed his vision and feed our performances. These stories are more than just stories. They're a way of convincing, if you like, or encouraging Alithea to understand the plight that he finds himself in and how important it is that, hey, you've got 3 wishes, you don't want them, but I'm going to tell you these stories just to give you a little perspective. So that is a big key moment for me, and key to understand how to, to approach it. It was key to understand as a performer, why storytelling is so important to the Djinn, why these particular stories are really important to Alithea's journey. This is a Djinn that felt human emotion. This is a Djinn that started to fall in love. This is a Djinn that started to fall into desire. He's immortal, so it's very uncharacteristic for him to start to fall in love, share human emotion, wants and desires in the way that he did. And it was that began to unravel his journey. So these stories were, they're placed in the film as a way of giving Alithea a little background, but in truth, for him, this is therapy. It's the stories we tell each other that shape all of this. At some point, someone said, hey, wouldn't it be great to build a skyscraper? That's a story. It's not a reality. It's like, what? A building that goes up to the sky and we can all be up there? That's like flying. Yeah, it'd be like flying, but it would save space. Instead of going that way, we go up. It's a story. It's an idea told as a story. And it's that has built what we are today, right? It's like when you have a child or you try and teach your child something, you use stories to do that. A film like this will sit as a time capsule of when George and Tilda and Idris and team work together, and this is the story they tell. What do you get out of that? And what you get out of that possibly is, well, it's a cautionary tale about desire. I think you get out of it that love can override, and love is very, very important. Love is a four-letter word, of course, but it's an emotion that we can only categorize by calling it love. And it's big, it's huge, it's a big thing for humans. And it's a big component of our story. Hopefully what I think people might grab from this is that, yeah, it's a cautionary tale, but also, you know, your heart's desire is your heart's desire, you know. It's your heart's desire. No matter how many wishes or, you know, fairy godmothers come along or whatever, djinns, it's only you that can make what you want. It's your heart's desire. So, yeah.
Well, the first part of the story for me was that George Miller wanted to play. I mean, that's a huge part of all of our story here. So anything that he was going to be presenting, I suppose, even though you're right, it's different from his other films. It's really not. It's kind of the same vibe. It's the same commitment to a kind of fantasy. So when I first read the script, I was reading a George Miller film, a script for a George Miller film. Idris and I met once at a party, which is a very sort of rare sentence for me to say because I don't go to many parties. But I met him at a party, and we exchanged that sort of very banal statement, "Oh, it would be lovely to work together one day." And I thought, never in a month of Sundays, but I'll say it anyway. And then several years later, when George mentioned making this film, he immediately popped into my mind, and he was already in George's mind. And so, yeah, we really met here. It's been a complete dream for me from start to finish. I mean, in the first case, I am a huge admirer of George's cinema, and he, in so many ways, makes a cinema that I respond to like a child. I mean, he makes, I am very, very pissed off, like most of my generation, that we never got to work with Hitchcock. But you know what? There's George Miller, and I now can call him a colleague, and that's a huge deal for me. But to work with him inside one of his magic boxes and see how he makes it is absolutely mind-blowing and much more than I expected. What I didn't expect was that all that work and all that rigor and all that mastery means that he's unbelievably fresh and free when you're actually shooting. So you're following this incredibly, it feels like a very, I won't say strict code, but a very established code. As you say, he works with a storyboard, he works with a shot list that's, you know, been there for a while, you can tell. It's sort of, you know, got yellowing pages. But even working with that long established thing that he's figured out for years he's going to do, on the day, at that moment, if you feel like saying, do you know what about that? He's there for it. And he'll go, try it. Why not? And very often, when we've done that, that's what he's gone for. So it's as if all that work, and I have experienced this, a filmmaker I'm privileged to also call a friend and collaborator is Bong Joon-ho, who works in a similar way in that he also works with a storyboard. In fact, Bong Joon-ho works with the editor sitting beside him. So you know exactly what you're working to. And George is similar in that way, that he gives you such a structure that you're completely relaxed and free. The shape of the film, the sort of trajectory, the arrow's journey of the film is to a certain extent about evolution, about human evolution, social evolution, I would say. And in particular in relation to the circumstances of women's life, yes, I think that's very accurate. And it's not a, you know, it's not a high note in the film, but it's there, and it's there to be picked up on. And it is true that Alithea is the latest, she's not the last, she's the latest in the chain of all these women whose stories are about fulfillment, because the film is about desire. What are your three wishes? What do you desire? She's invested herself in being content, in being detached from emotion, loves stories. She says she finds emotion through story. So her husband complains that she can't be sort of compassionate with his feelings, which is why he goes off with somebody else. She goes, okay, I'm going to make a thing of that. I'm going to become that person who's just an observer of other people's lives, a narrator of other people's lives, but I'm not really going to get involved. So she's got this detachment. So when she meets the Djinn and the Djinn says, what are your desires? She says, dude, I don't have any. And she's really proud of that. She thinks that's a great position, to not have any desires. I think her evolution in the course of the film is that she readdresses that and she evolves. She transforms, in fact. She's on this precipice of being, the Djinn brings her to the end of that particular line of living this sort of self-sufficient, unemotional, detached life. And he opens up the possibility of her changing and living an emotional life, taking a risk, taking a massive risk. She learns that you can't control somebody else's life. You are only in charge of your own. Enjoy the ride, enjoy the risk and the paraglide, but move on and go back to contentment, but be emotional with it. I think that's what she really learns. She learns a way of collating emotion with intellect, attachment with detachment, and she invites a kind of mess into her life at a certain point where it's all become quite clean and tidy. This could be read, this film, as the story of a woman who sees things. And the Djinn she sees the Djinn. Now there's a whole question for the audience about whether anybody else can, and we play little games with that. But it is possible that Alithea has brought up the Djinn. I think she thinks that she might have brought him up. So my point being, he's the Djinn that she needs him to be.
I first came across the story when I read The Djinn in the Nightingale's Eye. It was a short story or novella written by A.S. Byatt, and when I read it, I found it quite exceptional because somehow, in a compact way, it seemed to probe all the mysteries and paradoxes of life, or many of them. And it was a story that hung around in the back of my mind for such a long time until one day it occurred to me it should be a film. I think for me, what was most important is that, like Fury Road, I felt I approached stories a little bit like people used to use Geiger counters to find out where the intense radiation was. Is there a seam of story to mine here? Is there something sort of attractive that might have a lot of narrative energy? And that's, I think, what the two stories have in common. There's a lot below decks, as I like to say. There's a lot of iceberg under the tip. And my hope is that that's apparent or evident to the audience. This is a story of a woman who's very rational. And she encounters a Djinn or a genie who gives her 3 wishes in exchange for his freedom. The problem is that she's someone perfectly content with life. And secondly, she's a narratologist, someone who studies stories and knows that all stories about wishing are cautionary tales. So he has to persuade her by telling his own stories about being trapped in a bottle for over 3,000 years. And eventually she does make a wish, and it kind of surprises both of them. So the Djinn, in order to explain who he is and why he needs the 3 wishes from Alithea, is obliged to tell the stories that really affected him over 3,000 years. First of all, how he got into the bottle. He got there, as he says, by desire. He had a deep longing for the Queen of Sheba. And we visit that world. We see how he was a free Djinn until he was put in the bottle and trapped for 3,000 years. I called her Tildaness, and it brings so much as a human being and as an artist. And I was lucky enough to join that club of directors who work with her over and over again. I've only had one taste of it, but I know all those great directors she keeps working with. I know why, because there's something absolutely unique and magnificent about it. One of the essential questions she struggles with, am I mad or is this real? What is real? I mean, I think philosophers talk about ontological questions. What is reality? How do we know if something's real or not? What is existence? And all these issues are there, at least to some extent, questioned in our story. Like Tilda, I'd seen him in other roles, but meeting him in person was another thing. And the moment I saw him, he was the Djinn. I don't know why. Subsequently, I've been able to sort of try to figure it out. And I think it's to do with apart from his skill as an actor, like actors are like athletes, they have the natural talent and the skill is evident on the screen. But apart from that is that question of charisma. And charisma is kind of paradoxical because on the one hand, you've got somebody who's very accessible. You almost can be their best friend, or you have this feeling that they can be your best friend. On the other hand, they're amazingly mysterious. And that kind of conflict, that paradox, I think, is one of the essences of charisma. So both those things are what's inherent in the character of the Djinn. And that's how, that's how, once again, I'm really, really grateful to have him playing the Djinn. Both of them are kind of what I call filmmaking actors. Those that try to understand the process that the film is going through, and they're there to get the film made. They're both artists in that way. They're not just they're trying to see how the whole team can work together and also contribute to the strategies that would make the film work best. Even in the simplest, most fantasy-driven fable, there is truth. I think that's why we tell stories. That's why the way we communicate deep and deep philosophical and psychological issues to our children, we do it through stories. I learned that by making films about dancing penguins and talking pigs, and they have a lot of truth in them. And now here's another version of them. When you choose to tell a story and to engage a person, you're looking for something that feels special and plays off the familiar, as it were. And I think that's an obligation. I mean, you want to invite the audience into a story, intrigue them, and keep them on the wave of its unfolding, if you like. And I sense that this was available to us with 3,000 Years of Longing. The reason why a film like this should be seen in a cinema is because, first of all, when we go to the cinema, it's a kind of public dreaming. And stories, and particularly allegorical stories like this, are a kind of dream. You're invited into the dream, and hopefully you're caught up into it. So just on that level, it's something to share with strangers on the big screen. On a purely technical level, we work so hard on the vision and the imagery and what you're experiencing. We work so hard on the sound and the music and bringing that sonic landscape and bringing the two together. And we work so hard on trying to tell a story that keeps you leaning forward in your seat.
You know, he's an extraordinarily talented filmmaker, and the nature of George is he doesn't repeat himself. He loves being original, but not in an artificial way. So he owns the material, does a massive amount of homework and studying, and he brings that to the set and he shoots it. And he, you know, he has a tremendous inspirational quality for the crews that he works with. They adore him and he adores them. And so what you get is this extraordinarily visual, articulate filmmaker in a subject which has nothing to do with action vehicles. It's more of an adult drama with love as one of the core, love as one of the core reasons why he's telling the film. You know, in a filmmaker like George Miller, you have the ability to take what might be perceived as a simple story, and he delivers something that's extraordinarily attractive. It's unique and original. The performances, both from many actors, I mentioned Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba as well, but are stunning. And the degree of effort that George puts into every aspect of the film means that when we see the visual effects shots, there's about 600 in the film, they're properly advanced, finished product, so that you're taken into a world that you'll totally believe, with performances that are tremendous, and with an audio soundtrack that you will be moved by. At the core of the movie, which is love, and the mystery of love, the enigmatic qualities of love that we're all driven by. It's one of the main human aspects of interest in our lives, along with health, and I guess financial security. Love is a key part of it. But in many cases, the question that is asked in the film is, what's fantasy and what's real, possibly? Now, this is told through a beautiful story that is gorgeously shot and lit and looks lovely. But behind that, the adventures and stories, there's what is love, I guess, and how does that work? And why does even the Djinn fall into the trap of, pursuing it to the extent that he gets himself into jeopardy or problems? It's a common question for us all. 3,000 Years of Longing is uniquely original. It shows a story that Krauss says 3,000 years of real history. Embedded in there is the concepts of love, and there's the drama that goes with action and adventure, and it takes you right up to the modern day and holds you in some form of suspense. Is it, is what's happening imagined or real? And so the genre isn't. It's not an action. It's not an action movie like, say, Fury Road is, or a Mad Max film. It's not a murder mystery. It's not just a love story either, although that's probably the closest to the genre that I think would probably be there. In 3,000 Years of Longing, the Djinn is able to adapt, and as a shape shifter, he can adapt into the currency of the world he's in. In this case, modern London, or more modern Istanbul. He is, to all intents and purposes, tactile and human, but he is, a spectacular apparition as well. So there's a level at which, if you can come out of a bottle and form yourself as a real human, try and get your head around that. But that's what we're suggesting is real. And yet there is it an imaginative thing? Are people imagining this, or is it real?
Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and comment on the video if you enjoyed it. Click and watch our suggested video playlists right now for more entertaining videos. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to be notified when new videos are released.